I want you to close your eyes for a second. Okay, well, keep them open if you're driving, but use your imagination. I want to transport you back to a very specific moment in the American experiment. It's the mid-1980s. The economy is booming, shoulder pads are huge, and greed is. Well, maybe not good, like Gordon Gekko said, but it's certainly popular. Now, I want you to zoom in on Fort Mill, South Carolina.
I think I know exactly where we're going. I can almost smell the chlorine already.
You should be. You're standing in the middle of a theme park. It's loud, it's sunny, and there is absolutely the smell of chlorine and like waffle cones in the air.
Yeah.
Families are screaming with joy. They're sliding down these huge fiberglass water flumes into these sparkling blue pools. But this isn't Disney.
Yeah.
And it isn't Six Flags. This is Heritage USA.
Which, and I think people really forget this part, was the third most successful theme park in the United States at the time.
That's the crazy part.
It was trailing only the two Disneys. That's it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And running this whole empire is a man who isn't just a CEO. He's a spiritual icon. He's a man who looked right into the camera and told millions of people that God didn't just want them to be good. He wanted them to be rich.
Jim Bakker.
And then
Yeah.
I want you to just swipe that image away, totally delete it, replace the water park with a gray barred room in Rochester, Minnesota. The year is roughly 1990.
Okay, big shift.
Huge shift. The suit is gone, the hair is different, and this man, Jim Bakker, is sitting on a bunk, and he's looking at his roommate. And his roommate is not a pastor, it's not a choir director, it is the political extremist and conspiracy theorist Lyndon LaRouche.
It is, and this is not an exaggeration. It's arguably the strangest odd couple situation in modern American history.
Right.
You have the fallen televangelist, the king of prosperity gospel, and the man who, among other things, thought the Queen of England was a high-level drug dealer.
Just sharing a cell.
Just sharing a cell, talking about who knows what, the breakfast menu.
That is a fall from grace that is so steep it almost gives you vertigo. But when we started pulling the source material for this deep dive, the court documents, the biographies, the old broadcast transcripts, I realized that the rise and fall narrative is actually, it's too simple. It's missing the third act.
Right, because the story doesn't end in that prison cell. And that's the part that really hooked me when we were prepping this. It's the reinvention.
No, it doesn't. This is a story about a man who, you could argue, invented modern religious broadcasting, burned it all to the ground, went to prison for fraud, and then somehow came back. But he didn't come back as the same guy. He reinvented himself to match the nightmares of a whole new generation.
It's really a masterclass in adaptation when you look at it that way. I mean, we're going to look at how you go from selling the prosperity gospel, the idea that, Jesus wants you to drive a Mercedes,
right,
to the apocalypse gospel, where Jesus wants you to buy a giant bucket of freeze-dried beans because the world is definitely ending next Tuesday.
So our mission today is to decode the mechanism. How did he build the empire in the first place? How exactly did the fraud work that took him down? And then how did he survive that total collapse to start all over again?
And honestly, the how is just as fascinating as the what. It's a story about the intersection of faith and finance and the mechanics of mass media. It's so uniquely American.
Let's start at the beginning, because I think people see the caricature, the crying on TV, the makeup, and they assume he was always this cartoon character.
Yeah, the late 80s version is what's burned into everyone's memory.
Exactly. But you don't build a global empire by being a cartoon.
No, you don't. You do it by being an innovator. And to understand Jim Bakker, you have to go back to 1940. He was born in Muskegon, Michigan. Yeah. Very humble beginnings. But the path to stardom, it really starts in 1960. He's attending North Central University in Minneapolis.
A Bible college.
Right, a Bible college affiliated with the Assemblies of God.
And this is where he meets her, the other half of the power couple, the one who would define the brand with him.
This is where he meets Tammy Faye. They were both students. The story goes that Jim was working at a restaurant in a department store, and Tammy was working at a little boutique nearby. And the source material says the spark was pretty much instantaneous.
So it was love at first sight.
It really seems so, which was complicated. Apparently, Jim already had a fiancée back home in Muskegon.
Ooh, a little bit of drama from the start.
A little bit, but he began courting Tammy Faye immediately. They were just young kids, totally in love. In fact, they moved so fast that they dropped out of college to get married. And the wedding date was April 1st, 1961.
April Fool's Day. You literally can't write that.
You really can't. If you put that in a movie script, the studio would reject it for being too on the nose.
That's too much.
But they made a decision that would define the rest of their lives. They dropped out. They left college to become itinerant evangelists.
Which, in the early 60s, that's a hard life, right? That's not private jets and mansions. That's driving from town to town in a beat-up car.
Oh, yeah. It's the van life version of ministry, but without the Instagram filters and sponsorships.
Right.
They were driving town to town, hoping a church lets you speak, maybe passing a hat. They eventually had 2 children, Tammy Sue and Jamie Charles, who goes by Jay. But here is the key insight that separates them from every other traveling preacher in, say, 1962. They realized that just getting up and preaching wasn't enough.
They needed a hook. A gimmick.
They needed a hook. They needed to be entertainers. And this is the part of the story that always surprises people who only know the later scandals. Their big break didn't come from fire and brimstone sermons. It came from puppets.
Puppets? Like sock puppets on their hands.
A little more sophisticated than that. Professional comic routines with puppets. They created characters. They did skits. And this was, believe it or not, revolutionary at the time because it made religion approachable for kids and families in a way that, a stern man in a dark suit yelling from a pulpit never could.
The spinner theater for the church crowd. It's fun.
It's fun. It's accessible. And this puppet act actually gets them their big break.
Okay, so where do they go?
In 1966, they joined Pat Robertson's Christian Broadcasting Network, CBN. Now, you have to understand the scale here. Today, CBN is this massive global entity. In 1966, the sources say they had an audience in the low thousands.
So basically public access television level.
Pretty much. And Jim and Tammy Faye hosted a children's variety show. It was called Come On Over. And it was a hit. It was funny. It was engaging. And it used the medium of television in a way religious broadcasting just hadn't really done before. It wasn't just a camera pointed at a pulpit.
So they were pioneers of the format. They were figuring out how to translate the experience of church into the language of television.
Absolutely. They understood that TV is a cool medium. It's intimate. You're in someone's living room. You can't just shout. You have to connect.
And it works so well that it gets Bakker promoted.
Right. It does. In fact, because the puppet show was so successful, Pat Robertson actually made Bakker the host of a new primetime talk show. Maybe you've heard of it. The 700 Club.
Wait, really? Jim Bakker was the original host of the 700 Club. I always associate that with Pat Robertson.
Bakker helped build it into CBN's flagship program. He was the architect of the format, the couch, the chatty style, the celebrity guests, the whole Christian Tonight Show vibe.
Wow.
He realized that if you want to be in people's living rooms every single night, you can't just preach at them. You have to hang out with them.
That is a crucial distinction. It shifts the relationship from authority congregant to like a friend. The parasocial relationship.
Exactly. And that parasocial relationship is what monetizes so well later on. But Bakker doesn't stay at CBN. He seems to be a builder, but he's also restless. In 1973, he and Tammy Faye leave.
We're too nice.
They move to California. And they partner with Paul and Jan Crouch to co-found the Trinity Broadcasting Network, TBN.
Which is the other giant in the industry. He's like the Forrest Gump of Christian TV. He's there for the founding of everything important.
He is. He builds the Coca-Cola and the Pepsi of televangelism back to back. It's an incredible run.
So why didn't that stick?
The TBN partnership was really short-lived. It only lasted about 8 months. The sources just describe a falling out between Jim and Paul Crouch. There were clearly some personality clashes there. So Jim and Tammy Faye pack up again. They move to Charlotte, North Carolina.
Okay.
And in 1974, they decide, we're done building networks for other people. We're going to build our own.
And PTL is born.
PTL, praise the Lord. They launched the PTL Club in its late-night talk show format in 1975. And they founded the PTL Satellite Network. They were buying time airing programs through local affiliates all across the U.S.
And this is where the ambition just really starts to scale up. Because they didn't just stay in the studio this time. They started building a physical kingdom.
Heritage USA. This is absolutely crucial to understanding the Bakker phenomenon. They weren't just a TV show anymore. They bought a huge tract of land in Fort Mill, South Carolina, right on the border with North Carolina.
Okay.
And they built a headquarters called Heritage Village. But it just kept expanding. It expanded into a massive, sprawling theme park and resort.
I looked up some photos of this place from back in the day. I mean, it looks incredible. There's a replica of the Upper Room in Jerusalem, huge hotels, the water park. It wasn't just a church camp. It was a genuine destination resort.
It was the third most successful theme park in the U.S. at the time. As we said, only Disney World and Disneyland had more visitors. And the money. The money coming in was just astronomical.
How much are we talking, really?
By the peak, viewer contributions were estimated to exceed $1 million a week.
$1 million a week. In the late 70s and early 80s dollars.
Yes.
That is purchasing power. That is hard to even wrap your head around. It's not just ministry money. That's empire money.
It is, and this brings us to the theology that drove it all. At this time, Bakker was one of the most visible, most devout proponents of prosperity theology.
Okay, let's define that for the listeners. What is prosperity theology exactly? Because it sounds like a very specific American invention.
It absolutely is. At its core, it's the belief that financial blessing and physical well-being are the will of God for Christians, and that faith, positive speech, and donations to religious causes will increase one's own material wealth.
So if you're a good Christian and you give money to the church, God will make you rich.
In a nutshell, yes. Bakker was very explicit about this. He wasn't subtle. In his 1980 book, 8 Keys to Success, he wrote, quote, God wants you to be happy. God wants you to be rich. God wants you to prosper.
He wasn't hiding it. He wasn't saying be rich in spirit. He meant cash. He meant real estate.
He meant cash. He had a famous quote, I believe that if Jesus were alive today, he would be on TV. He saw mass media and wealth as tools for the gospel. But as you can imagine, when you have $1 million a week flowing in through a nonprofit organization,
people start asking questions.
Especially the government.
Right.
There were early warning signs. As early as 1979, the FCC, Federal Communications Commission, started an investigation into PTL. They were looking into allegations that funds raised on air were being misused.
Misused how? Like, was it just lavish spending or something more specific?
It was very specific. The FCC report, which was finalized in 1982, found that Bakker had gone on air and raised $350,000 telling viewers it would go to overseas missions.
Okay, to help people in other countries.
Right. But instead, that money was used to pay for part of Heritage USA.
So it was give money for starving children, but actually it was we're buying concrete for the water slide.
Essentially, yes. The report also found that the Bakkers were using PTL funds for personal expenses. But, and here's a fascinating legal and political twist, the FCC commissioners voted 4-3 to drop the investigation.
They dropped it. After finding all that, why did they not have enough evidence?
It was a very clever move on Bakker's part. They allowed him to sell the only TV station he personally owned, a station in Ohio. By doing that, he was no longer technically a broadcaster in the eyes of the FCC.
He was just a content producer?
He was just a content producer buying time on other people's stations, so he just stepped out of their jurisdiction.
That is some 4D chess right there. That is a sleek move.
And he spun it masterfully. He went on air, called the investigation a witch hunt by secular forces, and asked viewers to give the devil a black eye by donating even more money, and they did.
Unbelievable.
The Department of Justice also declined to prosecute, citing insufficient evidence. He must have felt completely untouchable.
But the IRS isn't as easy to shake as the FCC, right?
All right.
Their jurisdiction is just money.
No, they're not. In 1985, a confidential IRS report was completed. It found that between 1980 and 1983, $1.3 million in ministry funds had been used for the Bakker's personal benefit.
$1.3 million. For personal stuff, what are we talking about? Fur coats, cars, houses?
All of it. The lifestyle was famously lavish. Gold-plated bathroom fixtures, Rolls Royces, multiple homes, even an air-conditioned doghouse. The works.
An air-conditioned doghouse.
Yes. And the IRS report recommended stripping PTL of its tax-exempt status.
So why didn't it happen right then?
Well, no action was taken immediately. And there's a note in the source material from the Washington Post which speculates that politics might have played a role. It was the Reagan administration, and they weren't exactly eager to go after high-profile televangelists.
Their followers were a huge part of the new conservative political base.
A key part of the coalition. So the IRS report just sort of sat there.
So he's got the money, he's got the political cover, he's got the third most popular theme park in America. He feels completely untouchable. But usually in these stories, when you feel untouchable, is exactly when you make the fatal mistake.
And the mistake involved the 3 things that always bring down empires: sex, money, and a cover-up.
Let's talk about the Jessica Hahn scandal.
This was the pin that popped the balloon. And it's important to walk through what actually happened, according to the records, because the event itself happened years before it became public.
Okay.
The incident itself took place in 1980 in a hotel room in Clearwater, Florida. Bakker acknowledged having a sexual encounter with a church secretary named Jessica Hahn.
And the details here are heavily disputed, right?
Very much so. Bakker denied it was rape, claiming it was consensual. Hahn, on the other hand, alleged that she was drugged and raped by Bakker and another man, a former PTL Club co-host named John Wesley Fletcher.
Right. But from a legal and organizational standpoint, the crime isn't necessarily the sex. It's the money used to hide the sex.
It's always the cover-up. Exactly. A payoff of $279,000 was made to Hahn to buy her silence.
That is a very specific number, 279.
It is. And crucially, where did that money come from? It came from PTL funds. It was funneled through an associate, a contractor named Roe Messner, to hide the trail.
So, donor money, people's retirement savings, widows' mites, was used as hush money for a sexual encounter.
That is exactly what the investigation found. And at the same time, Bakker was also facing allegations of maintaining 2 sets of books to conceal these kinds of accounting irregularities. When the Charlotte Observer, which had been doing incredible investigative work on this for years, led by a reporter named Charles Shepard, started getting close to breaking the Hahn story, the pressure just became too much.
Oh, walls were closing in.
They were. On March 19th, 1987, Jim Bakker resigned from PTL.
But he didn't just walk away, did he? He tried to hand the keys to someone he thought he could trust. And this is where the story just turns into a Shakespearean tragedy. Or maybe a daytime soap opera.
It really does. It becomes this incredible power struggle. Bakker was terrified. He wasn't just worried about the press. He was worried about a hostile takeover from a rival televangelist.
Who was he worried about?
Jimmy Swaggart?
Jimmy Swaggart. The Great Balls of Fire, cousin of Jerry Lee Lewis.
The very same. A huge star in his own right. Swaggart had initiated an internal Assemblies of God investigation into Bakker's misconduct. Bakker was convinced Swaggart wanted to seize the PTL empire for himself.
A corporate raid, but with ministries.
Exactly. So in a panic, Bakker appointed Jerry Falwell as his successor.
Jerry Falwell, the founder of the Moral Majority, another titan of the religious right.
Bakker thought Falwell would be a caretaker. That was the word he used. He thought, okay, I'll step aside for a bit, let the heat die down, and my friend Jerry will hold the fort and then give the ministry back to me.
And did Jerry give it back?
Not even close. Falwell took over, looked at the books, saw the depth of the scandal, and in April 1987, he publicly barred Bakker from ever returning to PTL.
He locked the doors and changed the locks.
He locked the doors and then went on national television and threw away the key. Falwell called Bakker a liar, an embezzler, and a sexual deviant. He even said, and this is a direct quote, that Bakker was the greatest scab and cancer on the face of Christianity in 2,000 years of church history.
Wow. 2,000 years. That is not professional courtesy. That is a scorched earth policy.
It was an all-out war. Falwell tried to save the park. He even famously went down a water slide in a full suit and tie to try and raise money.
I remember seeing that footage.
But the debt and the scandal were just too deep. Donations plummeted. Falwell and the new board resigned in October 1987. PTL was bankrupt. The empire was gone.
And just to put a final ironic button on this whole saga, what happened to Jimmy Swaggart, the guy who started the whole thing by calling Bakker a cancer in the body of Christ?
In February 1988, less than a year later, Jimmy Swaggart was caught in his own sex scandal involving visiting prostitutes in New Orleans, leading to his own tearful, televised confession.
You literally cannot make this stuff up. It's like the writer's room for reality was just working overtime in the late 80s.
It completely shattered public trust in televangelism for a generation. But for Bakker, the humiliation was just the beginning. Because now, with the ministry bankrupt and his reputation destroyed, the federal government was finally ready to move.
Right, because the hush money was bad. But the real crime, the thing that sends you to prison for decades, was the business model itself.
Yes, the lifetime partnerships.
Okay, explain this scheme. Because it was the core of the criminal case, but it sounds kind of complicated.
It sounds complicated, but the math is actually quite simple and devastating. Between 1984 and 1987, as the financial pressure on PTL was mounting, Bakker started aggressively selling these partnerships. They cost $1,000 each.
And what did you get for your $1,000? What was the promise?
The promise was that if you bought one, you and your family were entitled to an annual 3-night stay for life at a luxury hotel at Heritage USA.
Which sounds a lot like a timeshare, basically.
It is, in theory, a religious timeshare. But here's the fraud. They sold tens of thousands of these memberships, but they only ever finished building one 500-room hotel, the Heritage Grand.
Oh, I see where this is going. So if everyone shows up for their 3 nights...
There's nowhere to put them. The prosecution at the trial proved that the partnerships sold far, far exceeded the capacity. They had sold enough partnerships to fill the hotel for something like 30 years straight if everyone tried to book their stay.
Wow.
And worse, the money wasn't even being used for construction. More than twice the amount needed to build the promised hotels was raised.
So where did the money go?
Instead of building more capacity, much of that money went to cover the massive operating expenses for the theme park. And according to the indictment, Bakker kept at least $3.4 million in bonuses for himself.
So he was selling a product he knew, for a fact, he could not deliver.
That's the legal definition of mail and wire fraud. It was, in effect, a Ponzi scheme structure, using new money to pay for old promises. In 1988, a federal grand jury indicted him.
What were the charges exactly?
8 counts of mail fraud, 15 counts of wire fraud, and 1 count of conspiracy.
And the trial happens in 1989. And the verdict.
Guilty on all 24 counts.
And the sentence. I remember reading this back then and just gasping.
Judge Robert Daniel Potter, a judge with the nickname Maximum Bob, sentenced Jim Bakker to 45 years in federal prison and a $500,000 fine.
45 years. That is a life sentence, essentially, for a man his age.
It was a massive, massive sentence. And the judge made his personal feelings very clear. At the sentencing, he said, quote, "Those of us who do have a religion are sick of being saps for money-grubbing preachers and priests."
Whoa. That sounds really personal for a judge.
It did sound personal, and that comment, the specific quote, actually became crucial later on. Bakker's lawyers appealed the sentence.
On what grounds?
On the grounds that the judge's own remarks injected his personal religious bias into the sentencing, which is a big no-no. And the appeals court agreed. They eventually voided the 45-year sentence.
So he got a do-over on the sentencing part of it.
He did. In 1992, he was resentenced to just 8 years. But before that, he spent time in the Federal Medical Center in Rochester, Minnesota. And this is where we get that odd couple sitcom scenario we mentioned in the intro. His cellmate, for a time, was Lyndon LaRouche.
The conspiracy theorist, political activist. The guy who ran for president like 8 times, including once from prison.
The very same. And according to some accounts, another cellmate for a while was a champion skydiver named Roger Nelson. Imagine the conversations in that cell.
I would pay good money for a transcript of those conversations. The televangelist, the political cult leader, and the guy who jumps out of planes for a living.
It's a surreal image. But prison did something to Bakker, didn't it? Or at least he claimed it did. It wasn't just about waiting out the clock.
Right, he had some kind of conversion experience.
According to Bakker himself, it was a time of complete theological deconstruction. He wrote a book in 1996 called I Was Wrong, and in it he admitted something just stunning for a man who had been on TV for decades. He said that prior to prison, he had never actually read the entire Bible all the way through.
Wait, what? The most famous televangelist in the world had never read the whole book.
Not cover to cover, that's what he claimed. He said he had just cherry-picked passages, taken verses out of context to support his prosperity arguments. In prison, he claimed he finally read it properly and realized he had taken everything out of context. He publicly renounced the prosperity gospel that made him a millionaire.
He said, I was wrong to tell you God wants you to be rich.
Exactly. He seemed to be, on the surface, genuinely repentant. He said things like, Jesus didn't teach prosperity, he taught sacrifice. He was paroled in July 1994 after serving almost 5 years of his sentence.
And he comes out to a very, very different life.
His entire world had evaporated. Tammy Faye had divorced him while he was in prison in 1992. He owed the IRS $6 million. He was essentially starting from zero. He was a pariah in the mainstream church world.
But Jim Bakker is nothing if not a survivor. He doesn't stay at zero for long.
No, he doesn't. In 1998, he remarries a woman named Lori Beth Graham, a former televangelist herself. And get this, they met and married within 50 days.
He always moves fast.
He does.
Yeah.
And slowly he starts to claw his way back onto the airwaves. This is the phoenix rising from the ashes moment. But the phoenix looks very, very different this time.
Very different.
In 2003, he starts broadcasting again, this time from a place called the Studio City Cafe in Branson, Missouri. Then he moves to a small town called Blue Eye, Missouri, to build a new compound, a new community. It's called Morningside.
Morningside. It sounds peaceful, Idyllic.
It's a whole new ministry, but the funding came from a really interesting source. A businessman named Jerry Crawford, who credited Bakker with saving his marriage years before, invested $25 million to get the new ministry off the ground.
Wow. That is a loyal fan.
Yeah.
$25 million allows you to do a lot of building.
It certainly does, and this is where we see the second great theological invention of Jim Bakker. He moves from the theology of success to the theology of survival.
Right. If the 80s were all about get rich, the post-9/11 world is all about don't die.
That's it exactly. He embraced apocalypticism. He condemned his old prosperity teachings as heresy, but he replaced them with a focus entirely on the end times. And the product line changed to match the new theology.
No more timeshares.
No. Instead of lifetime stays at a luxury hotel, he started selling giant buckets of freeze-dried food.
The famous buckets. I've seen the clips online, the tasty pantry buckets.
Beans on toast, survival gear, water filters, solar-powered generators. He wasn't selling luxury anymore. He was selling fear. Or, as he would frame it, preparation for the inevitable collapse.
And he started making some very specific claims, didn't he? He wasn't just a host anymore. He became a prophet.
He literally rebranded PTL. He went on air and said it now stands for Prophets Talking Loud.
That is certainly a choice, a very bold rebranding.
And he started claiming retroactive prophetic abilities. He claimed on his new show that he saw 9/11 in 1999. He said he saw terrorism coming to NYC and D.C.
It's very easy to predict things after they've already happened.
It is. But he kept making new predictions. He compared a 2017 Washington train derailment to the Titanic, calling it a warning from God. But the one that always sticks out to me is what he said after the Stoneman Douglas school shooting. He claimed God appeared to him in a dream.
Okay, and this is the one that really sticks in my mind, too. Describe what God looked like in this dream, according to Bakker.
According to Jim Bakker, God was wearing camouflage.
Kimmel.
Head-to-toe camouflage. And he had an AR-15 rifle strapped to his back.
God was packing heat.
That was the vision. And Bakker used this dream to support the political idea of arming teachers in schools. He also dove deep into partisan politics, predicting a second American Civil War if Donald Trump was impeached.
So he fully pivoted to the cultural and political anxieties of the late 2010s. The polarization, the fear of violence, the culture wars.
He did. He even went so far as to blame natural disasters on political figures. He claimed Hurricane Matthew was God's punishment because of President Obama's policies. He called Hurricane Harvey a judgment of God and stated on air that God would punish those who ridicule him.
It's a heavy, heavy pivot. But it worked, didn't it? He built an audience again.
He did. Morningside became a functioning community and a media hub. He found a new flock, people who were scared, people who felt the world was spinning out of control and wanted answers. But then 2020 happened, and the theology of survival collided head-on with a real-world pandemic.
And this is where the silver solution enters the chat.
Colloidal silver supplements. Bakker had been selling these for a while, advertising them as sort of cure-all, a panacea. But when COVID-19 hit, the claims got very, very specific.
What was he claiming?
On his show, he had a guest, a so-called naturopathic doctor, and during their conversation, it was allegedly claimed, or at least heavily implied, that the silver solution could cure or treat the coronavirus strains.
Which, to be absolutely clear for everyone listening, is not true. There is no scientific evidence for that.
It is scientifically unfounded and frankly dangerous because it might discourage people from seeking real, effective medical help, and this time the government came down hard, much harder and faster than they did in the 80s.
Who went after him?
Everybody. The New York Attorney General issued a cease and desist order for the false claims. The FDA and the FTC sent warning letters. The Attorneys General of Missouri and Arkansas both filed lawsuits against him.
It's like a greatest hits of legal and regulatory trouble. The government was not playing around with COVID misinformation.
And the financial impact was immediate and severe. Credit card processors cut him off. Visa, MasterCard, American Express, they all prohibited him from processing transactions.
So he couldn't sell his products?
He couldn't sell anything online. He had to go on air and plead for donations, saying they could only accept paper checks through the mail just to avoid bankruptcy.
He was deplatformed too, right? In the broadcast sense.
Yeah. AT&T, which owned DirecTV, asked the channels that carried his show to reconsider airing it. Networks like GEB America dropped him. It was a massive contraction of his reach and his revenue.
And amidst all this legal stress, his health took a major hit.
In May of 2020, Jim Bakker suffered a stroke. His son Jay went on the show and called it a minor stroke. But his wife Lori blamed it directly on the vicious attack of criticism he was facing from the media and the government.
So, once again, the narrative is the world is attacking us. It's never, we made a mistake. It's, we are being persecuted for our faith.
Always. That narrative is the glue that holds his following together through every scandal. But he had to settle. In 2021, he settled the Missouri lawsuit.
What were the terms?
The terms were strict. He is permanently prohibited from saying his silver solution could diagnose, treat, or cure any disease. And he had to pay restitution $157,000 to customers who bought the solution during the early months of 2020.
$157,000. I mean, it's a lot of money to you and me, but compared to the PTL days in the millions?
It's a drop in the bucket, pun fully intended.
So here we are today. He's back on the air, right?
He returned to the show in July 2020, just a couple of months after the stroke. He's still there, still broadcasting from Morningside, still warning about the end of the world, and still selling the supplies you'll need to survive it.
So what does this all mean? When you look at the whole timeline, 1960s puppet pioneer, 70s empire builder, 80s prosperity icon, 90s federal prisoner, 2000s survivalist guru, what are we actually looking at here?
You know, it's so tempting to just dismiss him as a simple grifter. And the fraud conviction speaks for itself on that front. But I think looking at the full arc of Jim Bakker's career is like looking in a strange mirror of American anxiety.
How so? What do you mean by that?
Think about the products. In the 1980s, what did people want? They were coming out of the economic malaise of the 70s. They wanted glitz, they wanted success, they wanted to believe that being a good person meant you could also be a rich person. And Bakker gave them Heritage USA. He gave them a gold-plated gospel for a gilded age.
He sold them the dream they already had.
Exactly. And then the world got scarier. We had 9/11. We had the 2008 financial crash. We had a pandemic. We have intense political division. People stopped dreaming of luxury hotels and started having nightmares about societal collapse.
Right.
And what did Bakker give them then? He gave them buckets of food and a cabin in the Ozarks to hide in. He didn't just change his theology. He adapted his product to the prevailing fear of the new era.
He's not shaping the culture. He's just reflecting its desires and fears back at us and then selling us the solution.
He is the ultimate salesman because he knows exactly what his audience is afraid of or what they secretly desire at any given moment in American history.
That is deeply unsettling.
Yeah.
But also fascinating. It suggests that if you want to know where the anxieties of a certain segment of America are at, you just have to look at what Jim Bakker's selling this week.
Which brings us to the final thought, I guess. It raises the question, does a man like Bakker create the market for these ideas? Or is he just the most visible, most successful symptom of a market that already exists? Is he a cause or is he an effect?
That is a question I think I'm going to be chewing on for a long, long time.
As well you should. It's the central question of his entire career.
Well, that is our deep dive on Jim Bakker. From the water slides of Heritage USA to the prison cell with Lyndon LaRouche, to the freeze-dried beans of Morningside, it has been a wild ride.
It certainly has. A uniquely American story.
Thanks for listening. We'll catch you on the next deep dive.
Stay curious.